Good morning. Welcome to the fourth season of Tech Hour podcast. You are joining me, Sangha, and my awesome co-host Morton. Today we have with us Malcolm Fisk, Professor of Aging and the Lifecourse at the University of Central Lancashire. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Sangha and Morton. I'm pleased to be here.
Malcolm, I've been really interested since I first read up on you a bit. I saw that, I believe the description was that you work as the interface of people and technologies, and that you're championing the need for product and service design that are ethical, inclusive, and empowering. What on earth does that mean?
Well, Morton, that is a huge question, actually, and I'll try and I'll try to home in on the essence, if you like. I mean, I'm doing quite a bit of work at the moment on social theory, which is looking at the way that we as human beings interact with machines and more recently with technologies. And of course, the nature of those technologies has changed quite dramatically with communications systems and networks and what have you coming into play, and therefore some new issues about our personal data and the way that this can impact on our identities, on our privacy and things like this. But there's quite a long history looking at technologies or machines and the relationships that we have with machines. And the biggest dilemma, is that the right word, is around the extent to which we are controlled by or our lives are shaped by the technologies that we interact with versus the extent to which we actually shape the technologies to do the things that we want or to serve our purpose. And my starting point, I mean, it's a terrible starting point, really, for looking at this is the Second World War and clearly looking at the way that machines were used for very destructive and inhuman purposes. And this led, it seems, from my exploration of different philosophers and social theories, to a kind of awakening that actually, you know, we should be controlling technologies more and making sure that they do the things that we want to. Now, this leads on, mind you, to the attitudes and perspectives of technologists and innovators who clearly do develop technologies in particular kinds of ways for particular purposes. And it begs the question as to what their perception of the purpose of those technologies is. And it also brings in some elements of risk as well, because products and services and technologies that are designed don't necessarily get used in the way that was initially intended. And so when we think about this in the context of digital health, then there are some dangers around, and those dangers, and perhaps we'll come on to this, are getting greater because of the issues around artificial intelligence and the way that our data is used. And again, there are certainly some very, very big questions about the purpose of some of the technologies that are being marketed for profit by different organizations, which are deemed to be for our health and well-being.
I really like that. That's a big dilemma. I don't think we've had such a big dilemma on this show before, because you are certainly right. However, I'd like to start just perhaps, I don't know if it's more pragmatical but systems have always been in place, haven't they? Also, those that weren't involving machines or technologies. So is it really the systems and the governance of those that is influencing or prolonging our behavior? Or is it now the machines and the AI? Weren't we just teaching Google to the classes earlier, or the previous generations, and previous to that, though, it was books and literature, and now it's AI. To really own it and hone in on it, do we need to then teach it, or do we need to say that's a no-go?
I think possibly both, Morton. You know, we need to obviously have some control, which I think is captured by your terminology there about teaching machines or technologies to work in certain kinds of ways. And also we do need possibly to say no, that technologies cannot be applied in this particular context or cannot be applied in this particular kind of way. I mean, one word we haven't used so far is about power. And influence and coercion and things like this that the technologies may have. And so there are some very, very difficult choices that have to be made by our governing bodies as to how we control, how we influence the developments and the uses of different technologies. And that is especially the case where we have huge mega corporations with lots of money who can exercise substantial influence over the governments and the decisions that they make, beg your pardon. I've even forgotten the original question you asked, Morten. So
No,
perhaps you can prompt me
I
again.
think you're actually pointing me to a sharper question then, because with big corporates now, as you say, being in a position to influence governments,
Yeah,
it is perhaps a change of the system landscape, machine, no machine. So maybe we are at on the verge of something we've not seen before.
yeah,
Because I've always said, no matter the toolbox or the tooling, it's always systems and power we're talking about.
yeah.
But maybe now there is a shift of power, at
Right.
least if you look at the history of the last 300 years or something like that.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And just to agree with something you said earlier, we do live within networks and systems and so forth. That's absolutely correct. So the question will be an ageless question as to the extent to which we are influenced by or we influence those systems and those networks, as well as influencing the design and usage of different technologies. But some people, when we look at AI, quite clearly do see some real threats that are huge threats to democracy. Especially when it comes to fake news and the manipulation of data and images and voices and people and heaven knows what else. And it means that the kind of truths that we recognize as ordinary human beings in our lives can no longer be trusted as truths or what we would like to believe are truths. So issues that are fundamental to our humanity about care and reciprocation and partnership and collaboration and peaceful coexistence, all those kind of things may be put under threat by the way in which governments or institutions, consortia, commercial consortia and commercial companies would use the tools that are now available and to influence us in other kinds of ways, to foster conflict and tension, to market their products, to make enormous profits, to externalize their costs to the public purse. All these kinds of things are in the mix. And because the power of the corporations, the very mega corporations, is now so great, then obviously that influence becomes much greater, or the potential influence becomes much greater, unless they find it within their souls. Can corporations have souls? I don't know. To behave in more appropriate and responsible kinds of ways. Sorry, that was a slightly cynical remark there.
No, it wasn't. And I think your example from the Second World War is brilliant, because I think we've always tried to exercise influence via fake news or via enforcing our power on others. So if we take an example from the Second World War, most likely, I'm not 100% sure, but most likely, flyers have been handed out from, an aircraft telling people in regions, this is what's happening now. Or it could be the radio. But now what you're saying is it's much more intricate. It's more difficult, elusive to analyze who's actually sharing what information because of algorithms, big corporates playing a part in this. Twitter's probably a great example right now. So it is actually a new situation for us today.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And just on the radio this morning, I was listening to a broadcast about the way in which obviously the Russian government is using propaganda to push a particular message in the occupied areas of the Ukraine. And if you're fed enough information with a particular message, then you're likely to believe it. And going back to the Second World War, I mean, one of the primary philosophers I've been looking at is Martin Heidegger, who did in fact join the Nazi Party for a while. But interesting that he was talking about technologies around machines, if you like, and the power of machines. But what people need to be aware of is that Hannah Arendt, who was a student of his, in fact, a lover of his, actually did some very good work on totalitarianism, and made the point that actually it's the propaganda, it's the words, it's the language that actually is more important than the physical tools of machines. So maybe we need to do a bit more thinking around our technologies, not so much because of the technologies themselves, but because of the way in which they are marketed and the kind of I hesitate to use the word propaganda, but certainly the marketing information that may seek to persuade us that these are for our own good. And that includes both the way in which we accept or not particular technologies, or alternatively, the way in which we are willing to share our personal data, which clearly carries the threat of a certain amount of intrusiveness. And if I can just come on to digital health a bit more precisely, clearly there's a big debate at the moment, and I've done some work on this about the way in which GPs in the UK are being encouraged to share the data that they have on their patients. And of course, many of the GPs are up in arms saying, hey, hold on a moment, we have a relationship of trust with our patients, whereby we keep their data confidential. And at the moment, the debate is ongoing, and I don't think the assurances have been strong enough about the way in which our personal data is being used or could be used and shared. And also the government is pushing towards a opt-out system whereby we are assumed to have given our consent to our data being shared, as opposed to an opt-in system whereby we are asked whether we would wish to and in what circumstances we would be okay about our data being shared. So there are some big debates, big discussions to be had on that. But in the meantime, the manner in which our data is collected and potentially shared is something that we need to be very wary about. And I should add as well, the European Commission, of course, is working on an AI Act, which will, and you've got the GDPR as well, which obviously offers some controls, which I think they will be moving towards reinforcing in different kinds of ways, which I think could provide a better safeguard for many of the European countries. Whether the UK follows suit, I don't know.
I have a question for you, Professor. How do you see it? Aren't people more aware of AI and what it can actually do? What about big corporates and their usage of AI? Do they work together maybe to use AI responsibly?
I don't see the big corporates coming together and seeking to work responsibly. They're perfectly willing to have their own kind of ethical codes and things like that. How well they enforce those, I'm not sure, and whether they're adequate, the answer is probably they're not. But with regard to broader awareness, I think people are becoming more aware of AI. Clearly, there are some issues there about people's understandings, our understandings of AI, because the whole concept is fairly complex. And when it comes to machine learning, the notion that technological devices can actually change or make decisions and potentially replace people is actually quite a threatening one. So I think the awareness will rise, and it will rise fairly steeply because of the publicity now that's being given to the fact that actually jobs may well be lost because of AI, whether it's you're working in the car manufacturing or assembly plant, or whether you're a doctor actually making diagnoses and determining treatments for your patients. So when it comes to people losing their jobs, then of course it's got serious repercussions if the kind of alternative options for you are going to be fairly limited. And are we looking to a time in 10, 15, 20 years where there's going to be less people in employment, and therefore potentially an increase in the number of people who struggle to make ends meet, and clearly with the health implications of that.
Now, I was just going to ask another question, which is probably a dilemma within the dilemma, because it's very hard, I believe, from a legislation perspective to control this, because on the one side, you want the fishing industry to be able to use AI to have a much more ethical operations than they do today. You want to be able to monitor crops, so you're maximizing the output for a relatively large population on this planet today. So that's one side of it. But on the other side, we're trying to limit, of course, negative use. But what's negative? And so we're in between legislation and ethical definitions of what's good and bad. So I think it's a real dilemma, and it is certainly for healthcare as well.
Yeah, the biggest point, I guess, is around not so much healthcare, though that's part of it, but about personal well-being, and maybe we've become too obsessed by the notion that modern medicine, technologically guided medicine, digitally driven medicine, can cure all our ills and help us live all to 95 in healthy lives. Which is slightly nonsensical. We've been obsessed with the notion of having longer lives rather than better quality lives. And so there, and also there's another message, isn't there? There's the message of new technologies help maintain our broader prosperity because we have jobs, we have commercial opportunities, we have incomes for our countries, and therefore for the public purse and so forth, so we can afford some of these things that are going to keep us living to 95. But yeah, are we becoming obsessed by the wrong kind of things, and therefore putting too much faith in innovation because it produces products and things that make profits, as opposed to having the range of technologies and the range of things that actually make our lives more purposeful and happy and contented and so forth, without the notion that we need to make mega riches all the time. Perhaps we should slow down, if you like, or try to escape from our obsession with profit at any cost, and think more in terms of well-being for a wider range of people. Oh, and the whole issue about work and employment and so forth, jobs is important here as well, when we bear in mind that many older people are retired. And too many people have got used to the idea of retiring early, relatively early anyway. Now, if you've been working on the building site and carrying hods and heaven knows what else in your working life, then it may well be that you actually deserve to put your feet up, retire, and do some other stuff that you're going to enjoy for the remaining years of your life. But for many people like me, who enjoy working in academia, then clearly there's an energy and there's a drive, and hopefully there's something worthwhile that I can keep giving to the field of digital health, for instance, because of the fact that I'm staying in work well over what would otherwise be my retirement age, and the technologies can obviously help me do this. And I probably wandered way off the point, but I think it is relevant, really, that our priorities are a little bit mixed up. The politicians, of course, want to show that the UK is wherever it is on the league table of GDP and so forth. GDP is probably not the best measure anyway. So where are we on the league tables of happiness and well-being? Probably you'll find that Botswana or something is higher up than the UK, which is absolutely fine if you live in Botswana.
You have also mentioned the jobs in relation to artificial intelligence. What do you think? Couldn't it be also a possibility that because of AI, people have more time to do things they actually enjoy instead of working?
Yeah. Well, it's a lovely kind of idealistic point, and I'm going to reach over and get something for a moment. Where is it now?
Citizen salary, wasn't it called that?
What? Sorry.
Citizen salary, or
absolutely, citizen salary sounds like a good idea. But anyway, what about this now?
Brave New World.
Yes. Now, this, of course, is Aldous Huxley's novel. And in this novel, then the people that essentially live in technology-rich world, but they're just kept happy with Soma and cheap entertainment and all the rest of it, and which kind of sorry, Morgan, you're giving it the thumbs up. I mean, fine, we're happy to be entertained, I suppose, but I guess the point that Aldous Huxley is making and is that it's a fairly mindless existence. We lose something about our independence, our self-awareness, and our potential for fulfillment in rather more sophisticated and important kind of ways than sitting on the sofa and watching mindless independence and taking drugs.
Yeah, but my thumbs up wasn't condoning. It was absolutely just to say that I think to some extent Huxley's novel describes, to some extent, I said, where we are today with I mean, the word binging is probably quite new. It's Netflix binging. You just sit and stream one episode after another. And it's not that I don't do it, but it is mindless and it doesn't really contribute anywhere. And I believe a lot of that resource could be used better. I agree with you. I think it's a very, very good comparison with that novel.
Yeah. Well, I think it's. I mean, we can learn a lot from fiction, to be honest with you. And there's other science fiction writers that kind of takes into arenas which are actually things or arenas that we need to consider much more seriously. Going back to social philosophers and what have you, you've got Jean Baudrillard talking about hyperreal environments, and clearly there are some issues there about the extent to which we promote the metaverse and other rather novel conceptions about the environments within which we can interact with each other. And actually, we have to ask the question as to what they will do for our well-being. And if they detach us from reality, then does that actually mean that our lives in the real world, our day-to-day world, where you go to the post office and get a pint of milk on the way back home and go to work and all the rest of it, are going to be made even more, acceptable perhaps, because of the fact that we are able to release ourselves into the metaverse, into some kind of hyperreal environment for our pleasure afterwards. Now, the other scary thing there, mind you, and it comes back to what we don't know and what we might be fearful of about our data-rich environment is whether or not those hyperreal environments will be dystopic and scary places to be, in which case if you have got, if you like, mental health issues, or you have some vulnerabilities because and uncertainties about your life and your safety and all the rest of it, will those hyperreal environments actually do any good for you, and what harm might they do as well?
I think if you've not watched Steven Spielberg's film called Ready Player One, it's relatively new.
Which I haven't.
No, but it really describes the situation you're talking about there, where you're living the main part or the fun parts of your life. You're living in the hyperreal or in kind of a universe, whereas the latter part is just where you're still just a body. And I can really follow the comparison with Baudrillard as well. And I think the first time I traveled to the United States, I felt that I'd experienced a lot of this before, because it was a hyperreal. It was some kind of a metaverse because of the exposure to American culture via so many different sources early on in life. So I really think that's a good comparison. I have another question, but I think, Sanga, you were about to say something. So
I was, but
go for it, Morten. No, that's fine.
I just wanted to make it more practical. So what's a good example of things coming together for you within telecare, telemedicine, healthcare, technology, human? What's a good fusion for you? Have you got any good examples?
Yes, I think so. Put it like this: I am focused a lot on the technologies, so maybe I'm being drawn away into a rather unsatisfactory environment within which services are provided to people. And by the way, I use that term "provided" rather than "delivered", because one of the ghastly terms that's used by many health and social care practitioners is about delivering services, and delivering, of course, is a very one-way term, which you might use for pizzas or letters coming through from the postman. So I very much favour, by the way, the idea of providing a service, because that suggests a closer partnership between people who are both the givers and the recipients of different services. And this brings me on to a point which I touched on a little bit with Sanga in a previous conversation about the bonds of affection and trust and love, even between people, and the way that they actually give and receive favours and support and so forth. And one thing that I'm afraid of with the technologies, or the digitization of many of our services, is the fact that some of the really important care stuff is lost in relationships that people have. The very word care very often is seen as just the delivery of different kind of tasks, which will cure you, or they will support you getting to the toilet or getting to bed, or help you take your medication, whatever it happens to be. So care is losing its meaning. Again, let's stick on a little bit of social theory as well, and look to the work of Joan Tronto. And she has pointed to the importance of those caring relationships, and also suggests, and I see this as probably true, caring relationships having been devalued because they're seen as women's work, and actually are a broader reflection of women's role in society as seen as the carers, whereas us strong, beefy men are the ones that actually do all the hard stuff and the inventions and the technical stuff, etc., etc. So where there are good examples, I think, are where you have got strongly personalized services, which are helped by technologies, and this could be for people with dementia, for instance, helping them get engaged and actually providing a bit more meaning in their lives by enabling them to look at videos and pictures and revisit places they used to go when they were young and things like this. There's some really good stuff going on at my own university around social prescribing and the way that people are being assisted with regard to their health, not so much in terms of tablets and pills from the GP, but in terms of linking up with local day centres or looking for job opportunities, getting training and all the rest of it. So lots of things that are very often done on an individual basis. Someone with, or some agency with the right kind of expertise, actually dealing with people as individuals rather than categorising them and putting numbers attached to their particular needs and then delivering something in a rather top-down kind of way. Others are probably better placed to talk about examples than I am, but that's how I see things, looking at things from my present perspective.
Fantastic. That's awesome. We are trying something new this season. So, one last question for you, Professor. Who is that one person, or perhaps more people, you admire the most in social care?
No, that's a very good question. Because of the fact that I've been looking at social theorists, and actually I've been, what's the right word? I was going to say finding a distinct lack of them, but can you find a lack? I'm not sure you can. So there are plenty of people with different kind of expertise, but I don't think there's anyone that's kind of joined things together. So out of the people that I've looked at who are still active in the field, I will name two that seem to be visionary, thoughtful and understanding of what is going on. The first one would be an American guy who's getting very old now, Stanley Joel Reeser, who actually foresaw a lot of the issues that we face today in terms of healthcare and the way in which technologies are employed in the health and medical context, and also the risks attached to that as well. So that's number one. Number two is I'm going to bring back Joan Tronto into the frame, because although she didn't address technologies, she's an American social scientist. She actually has set out moral values that are very relevant to the use of technologies in terms of our attentiveness and our responsiveness to people with particular needs. And my argument has been, when looking at Joan Tronto's work, is, well, okay, attentiveness, yes, technologies can help us be attentive to people's needs. Responsiveness, yes, technologies can help us respond in appropriate kind of ways. So even though she didn't shape her moral values with technologies in mind, nevertheless, I see her work as very, very relevant. And it comes back to the point, by the way, about I mean, she has a feminist approach to things, which is absolutely fine. But it comes back to the point about caring being something that is for all of us, and should be meaningful for all of us, regardless of gender. And I was going to give you a third one now. Who was that I was going to give you? Those two, I'll stick with those two just for the time being and say, yes, there is a kind of gap there. So we need someone to have that broader overview so that we can hopefully take things forward in a balanced and responsible kind of way, recognizing the positive roles of technologies, controlling them where appropriate, but also having an ethos, an approach to their use, which is going to be appropriate and which people with support needs can relate to, so that they're able to access the technologies and the services in ways that they want, rather than have them delivered to them, using that pejorative word, by some agency who hasn't really thought things through, or maybe doesn't recognize sufficiently the importance of the relationships that are at the core of care.
Bravo. There you go, government. That's your technology foundation for developing social care with technology as a helper, not a deliverer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well done. It's really nice to finally meet you, Malcolm, and have you on Tech Care.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Sangha. Thank you very much, Morten. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your favorite Take Care podcast with your friends and colleagues. Until we meet next week, take care.